Hi, everybody. Welcome to Photographer's Coffee Morning. Today, we're going to be talking to a photographer that's recently been recognized by the likes of Leica and a bunch of other brands, has had their first gallery shows, and generally been pretty incredible. Now, add on top of all that, this person is pretty young, pretty early in his career, with one of the clearest visual identities I've ever seen. Now, you might be asking who I'm talking about. This is Benj Story. If you don't know him already, you need to check out his Instagram. It's like an encyclopedia of incredible photographs. His handle is Benj, BENJ Story, STORY. Give him a follow. You're probably going to want your phone open while we're having this conversation today because his work's amazing. And you're about to hear a little bit about what went into creating it.
That's such a good intro. I've never, made me feel good about myself.
From an outside perspective, you would look at the work that you're producing and it has a maturity to it that you would not expect you to be this early in a career and producing work at this level. It is really impressive. And with, with that in mind, I'd kind of like to get a bit of an insight. Like, how did you even get into photography? Because obviously you've been on Instagram for quite a while. You've got a lot of work up there. But what was it that sparked that interest for you?
I, yeah, it was weird. I didn't really like photography. So I'm 24 now. So, which to me, I feel old. Like, all my peers are a bit younger than me. I get a lot of uni students messaging me and things like that. But yeah, I was in high school, so maybe 16, I was doing art for GCSE, and I can draw, I can line draw and things like that, but I take my time on it. And my issue with my GCSE was I take so long on my drawings that my sketch pads were empty, and you get graded on like how full your sketch pad is. So my art teacher was like, "You do know you can take photographs to fill fill it up." So I was like, "Oh, all right, do that." And then I didn't even jump straight into photography. I'd take a photograph, crop it right in, and then draw the rest of the frame off the photograph to start with, which obviously everyone's done that before, but I was thinking I was some sort of pioneer. And then I started to find I'd get the same satisfaction from taking a photograph, and I liked how much control I had um, of like I don't know, putting more time into a photograph. I felt like I was getting more back because I was getting exactly what I liked. Whereas with my drawings, even though I'd finished them, I'd get to the end of them and still be like, "Oh, this isn't it," and like hate my own work. But with photography, I was like, "Oh, I'm actually happy with that. Like it's finished. There's nothing else I can do," which was a new feeling for me, which I kind of liked.
It's interesting because I think that's something a lot of people can relate to. Like what you're talking about is perfectionism. Essentially, it's like you see something, and rather than accepting it for what it is, when you feel like you've done enough, there's always this tendency to like over tinker, do too much, change too much, and sometimes that can kind of dilute the way that we see something. And I think one of the things that everybody will probably agree is that you have a very considered, meticulous appearance in your image. That you've definitely got a sense of purpose in your photographs that you don't see all the time. So I can imagine that if you had that perfectionist tendency and then a considered acquisition and then the tendency to second guess yourself when it came to kind of finishing a photograph, that could be hugely detrimental if you weren't careful with it. And to be honest, that kind of brings me sort of into like one of the first topics that I wanted to kind of discuss, because for you, obviously you are 24 at the moment, like you said, but that does mean that the majority of your peers would have been growing up and learning photography digitally, and that is not your primary acquisition method. It's strange because like right from the beginning, the very first thing we're talking about is how you have a tendency to overwork things if there isn't a clear finish line.
With film, that there's a definite end point. With my work with film photography now, I have it so it's a set amount of rolls that I'll shoot for the client, and then that's it. It's not, oh, I've got unlimited amount of resource to throw at something. Whereas with film, because I've got for medium format, especially with 10 shots on a roll, after three rolls, that's your 30 images. That's it. It done. That's like the equivalent. What I would feel to me, comparing it back to my art, would be like putting the pencil down and finishing. Because it's a physical end to the body of work. I'm not always like, oh, let me just get this last one or let me get that. So I do take quite a lot of time in planning my shots out. I didn't shoot film straight away. I was digital for quite a long time, and I still do shoot digital quite a lot as well. Like all the stylized e-com I do and product work.
There's a huge body of work you've got on Instagram. You've got 570 images on there. So if people want to look back, there's plenty to look through. When you go back in your feed, you can see a definite change in the way that you started to approach photography around about 2 years ago. There's an image you took of your dad, and in the caption you said, "This is my first shot with my new RB." I think it was like you just got yourself a Mamiya, without overly glorifying the tool and not the artist. Like, it was a sea change, because prior to this your work had like a very cold tone to it. It was a lot more like natural in terms of like the colors were literal. Like what you'd see in the scene is what you were seeing in the image. But that shot of your dad marked an embracing of one of like a more kind of warm color palette with a little bit more of a pinkish undertone, and that suddenly informed the rest of your work going forward, to the point where probably about 18 months ago you landed on a style that seems to be something that you're incredibly comfortable with and working through all of your other work. What was it that changed? Was it just the fact that you had the film in your hand, or had you suddenly seen something that sparked? Like, what was it that made you embrace this warmer palette that you've moved to now?
Because I'm colorblind, so my color perception isn't accurate. Like that's what colorblindness is. Like um, even like my digital commercial work now, like I have to get it checked, which isn't an issue, but it's just a thing that I have to do. But with when I was like, oh, I'm gonna try film, I was getting it back, and from what I'd read about it and things like that, the film has its own palette, its own color, and it just made me feel not self-conscious about what I was doing and let me focus in more on making the work rather than being like, oh, is this color accurate? If I edit this, is it going to look really weird? And it made me like not enjoy digital as much. That's why my edits were desaturated and dark and kind of colder looking, because I didn't want to risk having an awful looking photograph because it was just the sky was not blue. So I think that was a big switch. And then I got to the point where I was shooting digital where it was like there wasn't any thought or emotional connection to any of the photographs I was taking. I didn't really know much. I never had anyone teach me about like exposure, aperture, and all these things. All I knew was if I spin this wheel, my LCD screen gets darker. I didn't know why. I didn't know what was changing. But when my granddad actually was used to shoot film, and he was like, "Oh, you should like," because he was like, "Oh, I'll donate you some cameras because you're into photography." So he gave me a film camera. I was like, "Oh," literally, my first roll was so blown out because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know ISO, like how to set it on the camera. It sounds so stupid now, but I was like clueless. My first ever medium format roll was in the back garden with my dad. And I was like, oh, I think we'll need to go outside to take these photographs because this film says 400 on it. So that's like, it might be too dark for inside. And it's like f3.5 at like 125 or whatever. I was like, oh, I don't know if I can go any lower than 125 for a shutter speed. Because obviously digital, I was like 500 thousandth of a second all the time. I was like, oh god, 125. What is that's going to be like slow motion? Isn't what I thought. And then I got the results, and the photographs meant more. It's weird to think back, actually.
I was going to say, because like 2 years is a long time in pretty much anybody's life, but I think the other way to look at it is that, considering how little knowledge you had before that, your eye was clear from the beginning. Like, your compositions, your like eye for a scene never really changed. It must have been frustrating, like knowing that you had that kind of like visual ability and then not getting the results you want. So how did it actually feel when you got that first rollback from the lab?
It just meant something. I think it might have been just because it was my dad, but like the overall result, like I don't think I edited the scans at all. It was just, oh, that's it. That's what I saw, what I imagined is now there. It's done.
This may have been unconscious, but since that point, your entire work has carried the color palette from this image, like subtle greens in shadow tones, like warm, like pleasant skin tones, like highlights that roll to a really warm color temperature, and very neutral midtones. People's skin looks incredible, and every time I see an image from you now, I can pick it out of a lineup, but it always reminds me of these earlier images that you took, because I see I see the moment where that flicked for you, and you kind of clicked. And actually, hearing about the color blindness thing makes a lot of sense, because it was like the thing that was missing before was a sense of cohesion. And I think that part of the reason why I really enjoy looking at your work now is that you're very careful to shoot things in series. So if you go to a location, you will have a body of work that's produced from that time, and you set yourself a limit. Like, this is how much I have to work with. Like you said, this is the material I have for this job, and this is it. This is what I've got. And as a result, the stories that you tell feel self-contained and intentional. But moreover, the color palette is incredible. So in terms of that, like, what does a typical workflow look like for you? Let's say somebody hired you for a job, or say you were going for a location to do some personal work. Let's pick that, because then there's no issue with client disclosures, etc. What would it look like? Let's say you're about to prep for a trip. How do you decide going into it how you're going to approach that travel? For example, on your website, if you want a specific example, you've got Alpine Summer. This is when you went to Chamonix. So how did you prepare for that trip? What does it look like when you're preparing to do one of these travel projects?
It's really like how you say about the story aspects and like series of images. Like that's actually quite a new thing for me. I say new, maybe just over a year ago, when I went to Chamonix the first time. I met a photographer there who's really quite inspiring for me in terms of landscapes and things like that. He's called Ben as well, and he was showing us down this like trail thing for this glacier in the mountains. He was taking photographs of just stuff, like it didn't look nice or anything like that. But then I didn't really think anything of it, and he was like, "Oh no, I'm doing this because when I post the image, I'm gonna have these other images to back it up. Like it'll hit more, have a bit more substance to it." So then I was like, "Oh, I'll try it, see what happens." And then I did it literally that trip. We went up to the top of the Midi in Sham, where all the hikers and the skiers go off over the. Well, I think it's got on my website. It's over the edge, like, and I just was like, I'm just going to try and make a micro body of work from this. I think it was 15-minute window I was there, and I got the scans back from that, and the work that I'd made was, at the time, I was like, that's my best. Like, I can see that, I can see emotion in it, I can hear it, I can feel something from it, but it's only because there's a set of them. Whereas if it was one by itself, it wouldn't have the same depth to it, I don't think. But whereas I've got like close ups, wides, just weirder angles. I had my Leica like over my head. I wasn't even looking through the rangefinder. I was just blind firing for some of them. That then has carried over into my actual work. Whereas with like the fashion things now, having a wider selection shows more of the product for a start. It is because that's what you're getting paid to do. You're getting paid to show something. So having more images as a series and a set and trying to tell a story with it, for me commercially, has helped, because if you're a customer and you can see either how it's being used, or like even if it's just in a certain environment, or even the models, if they're behaving a certain way, it can be really intimate or like really isolating. And I just try and mash them in as much as I can. Like I'll happily do a really intimate close up one and then just stick it next to like a wide, because I put a lot of effort into my locations scouting, which comes across from my personal work is landscapes. Let's say I don't want to put all this effort into finding and shooting on a location just to shoot it at f2, and you can't see anything. Like you can't see the background, you can't see where they are or things like that. But if you have the mix in the series, you can. So I can do shots like f16 followed by an f3 or an f2, and it just helps create the body more and fills it out, and just lets me have more freedom with it. If I can create it as a story in my head, I can get more ideas, and it's just, I don't know, helps my creative process go more like I'm writing a book than planning images, which has led me more into wanting to do like the exhibitions and things like that, and go down the more artistic side with it than it just being on Instagram and forgotten about.
I don't think there's any danger of anyone forgetting about your work. And like, it's interesting you talk about that because what you're describing is developing an art of sequencing. You're kind of being your own photo editor in a way. You're making the decision to make sure that your body of work is represented correctly and fully. And actually, the one of the things that does stand out to me is your use of depth of field is always appropriate. Like you mentioned, you don't shoot everything at f2, and I think for a lot of photographers, f2 is quite slow. Like a lot of photographers like to shoot everything at 1.4 or 1.2, me included. Like I love that look, but it doesn't really have a home in your kind of work. And there's definitely things in here that I'm seeing that have a shallow depth of field, but it feels like you're relying on the size of your capture medium to do that more than like using a wide open aperture. Everything feels quite sharp. It feels considered, especially your medium format work has a very kind of like flat perspective, despite it being quite feeling quite wide and expansive. Um, so from a technical point of view, you can tell that you're thinking carefully about this stuff. So if you were putting together your kind of kit bag, you had to select your cameras, your film stocks, and obviously you've got your shot list. You've mentioned already you're very careful about storyboarding and scene selection. So does your like equipment choice happen at that stage, or does it happen way before? Have you got like a go-to for each kind of like flavor that you like? You mentioned super close up and wides and etc.
I don't know. People always think I've got like a Leica M6 with all these lenses and things like that. My Leica has a Voigtlander 28 mil on it. That is it. That's all I've got. And then my RB has, I think the 127. I'm looking over there because it's over there. The 127, which I think is like a 65 mil equivalent. So I've got a wide, I've got a tight, and then that is it. And then I've got my Polaroid as well. And in terms of packing, I just bring that. I use my Leica, my RB, and that is it. Like I don't really have a camera bag. Um, my Leica will be around my neck, and then my RB is usually in a tote bag or something similar, with some film in there. When I committed to film properly, was probably when I went to Iceland for the second time. I had my Canon A1, which at the time was not very well. It had the Canon A1 cough. If it was too cold, it was just not enjoying life. Um, the likes of like a Leica M6 were just like people on YouTube with like thousands of followers, and they were the Leica M6 people in the film world. And it was like I was interested in it, but I was like, you know what? One came up for sale in a camera shop in Leeds. I just went, you know what? I'm just gonna get it. Like, why not? It's there. It's decent price. The lens was a decent price as well. I think I paid £2 for the entire thing, lens and body, which is a lot of money, but it's not compared to what the prices of these things are now compared to digital.
I remember talking you into buying that Voigtlander as well.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
You were saying before, like you don't want to be seen as one of these kind of like, let's say you don't want to be seen as being pretentious. You don't want to be seen as somebody that's on the bandwagon and jumping on something because it's like what everybody does. And I think one of the amazing things about the Leica system is that it's got like years and years of back catalog of all these lenses that weren't made by Leica; they were made by other people, and nobody looks at them. Like some of my favorite shots you've taken have been on that Voigtlander 28. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know, like that's a very affordable lens for the Leica M mount. Like, I don't know how much you paid for yours, and I don't expect you to remember off the top of your
Oh, I
head,
do.
but
I do remember it was 225. I paid for it. I got a really good deal on it. And if I
yeah,
was to buy the Leica equivalent, I'd be looking at £3. So it was like,
no brainer. And this is kind of like part of what I find interesting about your approach to this, because like you said initially, you bought the RB. For anybody that doesn't know, Mamiya made two cameras that were essentially the same. One was made after the other one. The RB, which stands for rotating back, like it has like a 6x7 back, and you turn it if you want a portrait shot, and you turn it the other way if you want a landscape shot, and you don't have to move the camera to do it. The RZ is like the newer, fancier, like more bougie version that everybody wants, because it's newer. but it's also more complicated and it's a little bit lighter, but the price difference is enormous. And I think that one of the things I like is that you won't allow the kit to get in the way of you doing the work.
No, I just want it to work.
Exactly.
It's a tool. I get a lot of messages on Instagram, and it's not always like a nice environment. The Leica community is great, and like everything from I've had from working with them has been phenomenal. But there is the kind of gatekeeper mentality that is in that community. Like, put something on my story quite recently of my Leica, just as like, oh, it's my camera. Um, and I maybe had 5 replies being like, "Oh, but you shoot on a Voigtlander, don't you?" I've got a Voigtlander because I have my Leica swinging around my neck when I'm climbing mountains. Like, it's lucky it's still there. Like, I was in the Alps and it swung down, and the rim of the lens where it's meant to be black is just silver now, chipped off. Um, it's just replaceable, and it's not going to die. That's like with the RB. It's mechanical. So from what I read, the RZ is obviously it's electric and impossible to fix. Well, it's not impossible. There's just no one who knows how to do it. RB is heavier, but it's mechanical and less likely to have a wire snap in it. Or it's not because there's no wires in it. I recently just got the Mamiya 7. So I've got like the classic trio of hype cameras, you could say. All these cameras have the price tags they do because they do work. If you are in the industry and you're using them as tools, then they pay for themselves and you can rely on them. And that's the first thing I say to anyone who's always like, "Oh, I'm thinking of getting a Mamiya 7 or I'm thinking of getting a Leica M6." I'm like, do you need that if you're just shooting film on a weekend with your mates? Like, it's so bad. I'm such a bad person for like, oh yeah, I really like her, but I'm not going to tell you to buy one.
But that's kind of the point, though. Like, you want the honesty, right? Like, it, you remind me a lot of like a friend of mine, Jim Marsden. Like, he actually, hopefully, we'll be having him on the podcast coming up soon. But he doesn't shoot anything that needs a battery for exactly that reason. And for me, that's terrifying. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, I am the techie guy, but it's always nice to kind of see that when people approach their gear selection with an end in mind, it kind of narrows the choices that you can make in a really nice way. Because now I feel it. I need it to not break. It can be around my neck all the time because I don't want to have to carry it. And then when it isn't around my neck, my other camera, my big camera, in inverted commas, it is in an over shoulder tote. And you're right, because it's a big camera. And that camera can be in that tote bag because it's bomb proof. Like, there's no electronics to go wrong. Your connections aren't going to come out. Your lenses don't need like some kind of special communication. Because for you, the important thing is, can I get to where I need to be without it getting in the way? And will it break when I'm there? And if the answer to any of that is yes, you're like, it's not for me.
Yeah, that's honestly, even with like, I shoot all my commercial digital stuff for the companies that I work for in the studio, and literally every week I've got, I think, 4 batteries for that Canon EOS R. It was yours, wasn't it?
It was mine.
Um, I'll get to the studio, rock up, turn my camera on, it'll be flashing red. I'll put the next 3 batteries in, all of them will be flashing red because I'm just like, oh, I forget you have to charge them. Whereas I don't think I've put a new battery in my Leica in the last year. In fact, no, that's a complete lie. 1 battery in the last year. Ironically, it died on me when I was in Madeira doing the thing. I did a thing with the Leica's M11 in Madeira and doing like a side by side digital and film with the Leica M bodies, and my M6 battery died, and I thought it was broke. But oh god, that was heart attack right there.
I mean, honestly, like there's a case to be made for you that your next camera after your M6 eventually breaks being an older Leica that didn't need a battery. I can imagine you with an M2 hanging around your neck, with just the 28 on it still.
That's the thing. Like with film, obviously the images it comes through the glass. So if I could put that Voigtlander lens on it, then I would use it. Like, I don't even need an internal eye meter. All that camera body does is have consistent shutter speeds and then shine some light onto the film. Any film camera can get the same result. I think it's just the reliability of some compared to the others is where the money side and these big name brands come in. because that's what they're known for.
So I think people get mad at me if I didn't ask you about your collaboration with Leica, because obviously, like you said, you had an M11 in your hand right next to your M6. So how did that even happen? Like, how did that start?
I'm in the like Instagram world of like having a following, and I don't really understand it. Has led to like a working with me more. Like a one of the only brands that I know of really that are so responsive to the community of people that are using the cameras. Like I shot Canon and shoot Canon up like I have done since I started, and not once in my life has Canon liked seeing anything that I've done. Whereas I remember tagging Leica in like my first M6 image, which just happened to be from Iceland. Straight away they were liking it, and then it became more. I think it worked out. I worked out last year actually because I was like, oh, this has been quite a good year, and it worked out that I'd been shared on Leica's either story or main feed. It averaged out to once a month for Leica UK.
That's incredible.
Leica, I think it was I asked them, which is something I've learned from getting some followers on Instagram and talking to people who have way larger followers than me. Like people like Joe Greer, for example, like I've spoken to him a few times, and like if you have a following, yeah, it's amazing. But people don't give you things unless they want to make money out of you, and if they want to give you it, it's usually a bad deal. Whereas if you're asking for it and if you pitch to them, then it you have more creative freedom with it. You can pick and choose kind of what you do. I was like, I'd love to try the M11, or in fact, I didn't even say M11. I just said I'd love to try digital M to see how it would feel compared to my M6. Kind of looking at swapping over, and I wanted to kind of test it, I guess. But then they were like, "Yeah, we'd love you to do this project." Next thing you know, this M11 arrives, big old Pelican case with a liability contract. Oh my god!
Like, I can't think of anything you'd hate more than getting that through.
Oh my god, I read this email. I think it was like they sent me the M11 with the most expensive 28mm they could possibly have given me. I was liable for like 15 grand, I think it was, worth of kit. I was like, oh well, they've given me it now.
It's too late. Like it's over. I'll sign the waiver, but come on, that's not a guarantee of anything.
Yeah, it's the fact that I was taking it abroad as well. Like I
Yeah.
was going on like 4 days away with my mates to do a tourism like job with like Madeira and Portuguese tourism board. I was like, this is not gonna go well for this camera. But I fell in love with it. If it was just a bit more intuitive, or maybe if I just had longer with it, but I don't think I'd be able to use it for commercial. That's what I kind of settled on. With it obviously not being autofocus or still quite slow, even though it's a digital system. For me, like the studio settings and things like that, I was like, oh, this for portraits it'd work, but for products, no. Like even when it arrived, I didn't know anything about how this thing worked, like getting things and giving things back. Like I shipped it back to them. Oh man, 2 days later, they sent me a an email being like, yeah, so we've arranged collection for the Leica. Collection? I sent it 2 days ago.
I mean, 2 days isn't that long for shipping. I'm sure it got there fine in the end. I'm guessing. I'm hoping. Otherwise, you're still going to be working off the cost of that camera and that lens.
Yeah, I've just got a big Leica actually sat here with a gun to my head and, and out of frame. No, it was. I just shipped it to the Mayfair store in London. So then the ship they like tracked it down and found it. When they announced the new M6 coming out, they were talking to me about that. I was like, oh, it's the same. Like, because my M6 is the original version of the new one. I was like, oh, service mine. So I went to the guys over in Manchester at the store there.
Oh yeah, just by the now you've mentioned them, like Ben at the Leica store in Manchester is an absolutely amazing person. If you are in the north of England, you should definitely go visit them.
100%. Might see me there. Might see you there. It's the first time I've ever been somewhere and felt like a celebrity. It was like my son follows you on Instagram, and he's like, you're the reason that we went out to Chamonix in the summer to do all the biking trails and things like that. And I was like, ah, cool.
Like you sound uncomfortable, but that's literally the goal. Like you just said the Madeira Tourism Board hired you to get like do this kind of work, and this is kind of what I mean. you mentioned before about like, oh, I should be more like social on social media, but I'm not sure that works for your brand. Like, part of what I like about this is that it's kind of an account that you could be anybody. So I don't mean that to minimize it, because the fact is that your photography takes me somewhere. And exactly the same way as like watching a TV show, you put yourself in the position of the person that's the lead in the lead role. You can see them like moving through these activities, but you're feeling those emotions. I get the same sense from your work. Like when I look at you on a mountain range, I don't think like, oh, I wonder who did this or what's it taken on. Like maybe Benj had a great time. That's not really what I'm thinking. What I'm thinking is, good grief, look at those mountains, aren't they amazing? It's like your photography has an absence of ego, and I think that in a way, like part of the reason why you find it so uncomfortable to be noticed in that way is because you're not creating it with a sense of like, I'm going to promote myself here. You just like, this is something beautiful and I'm going to share it.
I don't think about it too much. I just got like the thing that I do is I post. I've got my hashtags, which I don't know. Instagram's one of those ones where it's like, oh, people like, yeah, use hashtags. You don't use them. I whack them in every caption, post, and then close the app. I don't really look at my own. I don't look at my own profile on there. Like if I'm on there, I'm looking at other people's stuff and consuming it more. Because my Instagram's not me.
I think that's healthy. Part of the problem that comes with like oversharing on social media is one that basically it's okay for people to like the stuff that you make and not have to know and like you. It's okay to have that separation. And I think especially with this kind of trend that you should be more yourself on social media, that's great. But not everybody's like idea of being themselves is being an extrovert and being loud or even competing for attention. And I think that if you look at the way that people deal with social media, there is a tendency to be bigger and more brash to try and garner more attention. And I don't think that you need to fall into that. That said, I do kind of want to switch gears a little bit, because I was asked about the M11 campaign, and you mentioned you shot it side by side with your M6. And when I looked at the 72 Hours in Madeira post, like, on your website, one of the things that really appealed to me was the color palette that you had. And it dawned on me that I don't think that any of the images that I really loved color wise were from the M11. No offense, Leica. I'm pretty confident the images I picked out of the lineup were from the RB, because I'm looking at a shot right now of a group of people on a pier, like jumping off into the ocean.
That's my favorite shot. So that image of them jumping off into the water, for me, it captures an emotion. You can see like it's a joyful scene. Um, I like the framing of it, like this looking down. I don't know if the one on the website has it, but there's the film burn.
Yeah, you
At
shot the zero frame without a doubt, like
yeah,
without a
yeah,
doubt.
yeah. I think it was the first frame on first or last. I can't remember on that roll. And it's timeless, in my opinion. Timeless. Like that scene could be happening at any Mediterranean coastal spot. You could show someone that and they'd recognize it. It'd be like a familiar feeling.
I was going to actually ask about the timelessness of it, because obviously you can't really talk about film without talking about that. And you'd mentioned earlier in the conversation about you can use any film camera and put the same lens on it and it's going to look the same. Like the lens and the kind of film stock are the things that are kind of the beginnings of you deciding on a style. And then obviously you've got the considerations with lab and scanner, and it goes on. But let's say that you look at the film stock as being like most people would choose a digital camera company. Like, what are you using? Are you typically favoring Fuji stocks or Kodak? Like, what film stocks do you tend to prefer? Because again, if you're going for a timeless look, that is relevant, because these film stocks have got a history to them, you know.
Yeah, it's. I've got to say Kodak on record. Kodak on record.
I mean, they're the only ones making film now, as far as I can tell. But
I've started to value the connections that I've gained more now. And I mean, Kodak. I mean, all jokes aside, Kodak is the film, like you said, that only people actually make it anymore. If you can find Fuji, and then Fuji, like when I first started, and I love Fuji color. The Superior Extra 400, I think it is insane. Like I love that color, that film stock. Um, And even like my black and white is XP2 by Ilford is again my favorite.
Yeah. It's
But
the color film that only produces black and white images, so you don't have to find like a special developer or anything. Yeah,
yeah,
XP2 is cool.
it's C41 developing, and in my opinion, it's Portra 400, just black and white, like tone wise, how it falls off, and things like that. I pushed it recently at a gig that I shot, which is another like dream come true moment. Like,
You mentioned before that one of the big things for you was having the film aesthetic kind of applied over your images, took away the drawback of being colorblind. But frankly, everybody has to learn color. Like, I am definitely not colorblind. I've got really good color perception, but I did not know what good color was until I shot a lot of film. And then you kind of train your eye over time to kind of appreciate the stuff that's in front of you.
my dad works in print, commercial like level printing, anything from posters to Nurofen packets, like anything that is commercially printed. And his eye for color is insane. So obviously, how they do it, each color's got a number, and there's like 1,000. It's like 0 to 1,000. The first 115 numbers of different variations of white. He'd be able to tell you like number that's like this white here is a number 54. Like he'd know. When I first started photography, he was always the one that was like, yeah, that grass is a bit of an odd green. Or something like that. Started shooting film. My dad got off my back about my colour. It's all right.
People say that color perception is subjective,
Mm,
but then again, like Kodak developed their color palette over such an extended
yeah.
period, and it's a bit problematic because of the way that essentially they completely ignored an entire. They only focused on Caucasian skin, and essentially everything else did not look very good on Kodak film for a very long time,
Yeah.
which is a separate issue. But that aside, especially if you're looking at landscape, for example, they literally had a team of people that were trying to make chemistry look as pleasing as possible.
Mm,
And we had hundreds of years of them refining this. And then one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with digital is that many camera companies are just trying to give you a data set and not actually give you a look. And that's a problem, especially considering that in your case, again, what you want is to be able to get something that's finished, that gets out of the way, and gives you constraints so that you can tell a story inside of that. If you're then given an open ended process where anything can happen and you've got infinite input, I can imagine that being overwhelming for you.
yeah. Yeah, oh God,
And
yeah. It is.
and that's kind of why I was surprised at the M11 thing. So again, you had the M6 and the M11 side by side.
Yeah, yeah.
What was it that made you think, as you said, it doesn't have autofocus, you love the camera. How did you find the experience as an almost solely film shoot for the stuff that people have seen of yours? How did it feel, like knowing that you were taking these shots and there was a post-production burden on the other end of it?
Not very good. It was really enjoyable to use. But then as soon as it got to I think it was the moment I had to take the SD card out of the camera and put it in my laptop. I was like, what am I doing? Like, what is anything personal is film for me. And it has been for the last 2 years. It's only commercial stuff where the digital camera will come out for the brand security to them. Quite a lot of people, film's a bit of a unknown. Like I've had people think some of my medium format scans are digital because they don't know how they don't think film is as good as that, and they think, oh, that must be a digital image because of it looks so sharp. It's got really good depth. There's no fall off. There's no grain. It's what your digital cameras are based off, so it must be good.
The look that people associate with film now is like a lomography style look. It's the kind of lo-fi Contax T2, Contax T3 look. And we had an in-depth conversation about this with Dennis Roy Coronel a few episodes back. Because for him, like he was like me, and we both found that OG film aesthetic, the kind of really high quality, like timeless aesthetic, to be the thing that we care about the most. Whereas the perception of what film is has changed from that to nostalgia, and the nostalgic effect is as rifling through the kind of like photo albums that our parents had in drawers from being a kid. It's looking at photographs of yourself that were taken on a point and shoot, or like wondering what it would have been like, or even grandparents shots, like when you're looking through your mum and dad's photographs when they were kids. Like, whereas what you're looking for isn't that necessarily. You're not looking for nostalgia, you just want character. The reason people are shocked by it is they don't realize that these characterful clean images are are being produced on film. You mentioned the Mamiya 7 earlier. Like when I first started in photography, the Mamiya 7 II was by far and away the most common camera that I saw being used on commercial portrait sets because it was really good with strobes. People were well into digital, and these commercial photographers were holding on to these 6.7s for dear life and for good reason. It's a beautiful negative.
Brands, when they approach me, they want the medium format look. I've only seen a few people be able to replicate a medium format look from a 35mm camera consistently. I mean, I got mine just because I'm tired of carrying the RB. I'll be able to go on a hike, shoot 35mm and medium format and not need a bag. I mean, that's the thing with them. You can create any look you want. You can go really high end, like it almost looking digital, or you can get the low-mo effect, and you can get that using the same stock. Like if you underexpose a roll of portrait and put a flash on it, it's gonna look like dunked it in a canal. Whereas if you expose it well, it's gonna be the finest, sharpest image that you could probably see.
Your digital work does not have the aesthetic that your film stuff does.
Not at all, no. It could, but I've got the constraints where it's not allowed. Like this isn't. I've got it here. I'm showing you like you can't see it. But like this work isn't. I can create the set and things and get the ideas and how I shoot the products, but it has to fit their brand guidelines.
It's the reality of being a commercial photographer. People see your work and think, "Oh, it's all your own aesthetic," and it never is. There's a reason why you don't see much recent work from me on my feed, and it's not because I'm not proud of what I'm making. It's just it doesn't fit the aesthetic that I prefer.
Any model work I do is film and digital side by side usually. Like I won't do the job if they won't let me. I'll be able to get the result I want from the film, but then I'll be able to get the result you want on digital.
Even with the size of your personal account being as big as it is, like this is the stuff that's actually paying your bills.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like what 50 followers.
That kind of goes back to the conversation we were having earlier about how you really should not look at your following because it doesn't translate to anything.
Doesn't pay bills. Exposure. I do get it on my main account. They'll be like, "Oh, can you do this? Can you shoot this for us, or product shots, or whatever for a brand? They'd love to. We'd love to send you some clothes. Can you shoot them and get a model and whatnot?" I'm like, "Yeah. So what's like your budget?" And like, "Oh, we don't really have a budget, so but it's exposure." I'm like, I can get exposure for free because Kodak follow me. They can they when they reposted an image, they reposted my Highland cow photograph. I think I gained 2,000 followers from that one photo in a day, I think,
That's like 2/3 of my account.
and that cost me nothing. It cost me a roll of Kodak Gold.
And I guess that's a warning as well because people don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm really open about the influencer side of photography because it's just people not are not educated in it, or people don't talk about it. And it's like when you try and ask like the older generation to talk about the salaries and stuff. And I'm not going to judge you on that. Like you could literally ask me what I earn on Instagram, and it's literally nothing. I think I've earned from actually doing any actual jobs on Instagram and paid promotions on there, definitely less than a couple of grand, I'd say, if that. Which for someone with like an account like mine is nothing. Like, I know people who are way less following than me that are just actually making a lot of money on Instagram, monetizing everything. But my jobs have come through Instagram. It's like I'll end up working and getting a client on a retainer through something that they saw on Instagram. But the actual like paid side of it and the side that people see isn't a thing. I don't think it's allowed me to work like when I shot like the gig I shot recently, which was just
Let's name it. You just shot the editors,
I
like
shot the editors, yeah.
which is amazing.
That's my recent thing on my website. Actually, I posted that last week. I grew up listening to them in my dad's car. Then I became a fan, and then again through the world of Instagram, their guitarist follows me, and I was like, you know what? Like I was saying earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I was like, I'm gonna message this guy, see what he says. And he's like, oh yeah, come and our Manchester show is sold out. Like you should definitely head over. I was like, all right, cool. expecting to just be like shooting the show. So like in the prep for it, I bought Kevin Cummins' book that he did with Archival. I think I'm trying to read it. It's just there. And Kevin Cummins was the photographer for NME and Joy Division. So I bought that, studied it, and messaged him on Instagram, been asking for advice. He replied, which is again mind blowing. Just get starstruck. I was like, oh wow. I was like, I love how you shot Joy Division, New Order. Like, I love how that imagery works. Like, if I think of imagery of musicians from the past, that's what I feel. That's what I want. That's what I want to recreate. Comes to shooting the editors, it's not just the gig. I got there at 3 p.m. left at midnight, so I was there with them for 9 hours. They were on at 9, so I had 6 hours before with them, documenting them in the dressing room, the sound checks, experiencing the whole thing, and then obviously shooting the gig. And that was just for me such a moment of like, oh my god, I've shot this band that I'm a fan of. Like, oh my god, like a fangirl moment. But then, on a more personal level, my mum and dad are like obviously very supportive of me and things like that. My mum is just like anything creative is insane. I'm taking her to New York actually for my exhibition in 2 weeks that I'm in. Yeah, I'm bringing her along with me because I think her seeing that my work on a wall in Soho, New York, it's different for me to tell her what I've done. But for her to see it, I think it'll be quite special. And for my dad, as soon as he was like aware of, oh, wait, you mean you're hanging out with the band and like you're friends with them now, like you got their numbers, like what? Like that was a bit of a personal moment for him, realizing what I'm achieving, which is a quite big thing. I want them to be proud of me, obviously.
You see, my hope from this is that really your mum gets to see just how many people appreciate your work as well. So, just to kind of let people know how to get in touch with you, what's next for you? Have you got anything else upcoming you've forgotten to tell us about other than this amazing art show you're going to be part of? What's on the horizon for you, Benj?
Well, the best way to get in contact with me is my Instagram. I say that, but obviously the message requests world is not what I'm on top of. So if you desperately want to get at me on Instagram, or a comment, Instagram comments go further than an Instagram DM, in my opinion. Like if I'm not following you and you message me, I am not going to see it because Instagram tries to keep people safe, doesn't it? Doesn't want to let anyone just randomly message you. But you can comment on anyone's post and say anything you like, as long as it's nice and Instagram deems it as being safe. And I see all the comments because I get a notification being like, oh, this person's said, oh, nice mountain. In terms of what I'm doing this year, I'm traveling a lot more. That is the main one. Making more bodies of work that are travel, not themed. I don't want to be like a travel photographer or whatever, but I just enjoy travel and I enjoy hiking. And the photographs are actually a byproduct of that. I don't go to these places to take photographs, really. I think that's second. I go because it like looks nice, some nice walks there. I'd like to be in that environment. And if I get some cool photographs, that's cool. I'm just knuckling down on my career this year, photography wise. I'm now working basically 4 days a week, full time as a fashion photographer, which has only happened in the last couple of months. Literally today, I signed the contract for the new job. If you were to say to me last year that I'd have been a full time photographer and it'd be my main income, I'd have been like, no, be able to quit working in retail and actually start my career, which I think is going to be my main focus for this year, as well as the traveling and using the holidays and stuff like that. And it's in fashion, it's in what I want to do, and it's for brands that I'm passionate about. That is the main focus. Probably some other stuff, workshops, in a few like early stage talks with the guys over at Leica Manchester, doing film walks and doing more like community things. Yeah.
I think I speak for everybody here when I say that you may not have seen yourself having a career in photography until recently, but we all did, like all of us. Like, I remember talking to you about this in 2020 and being like, "No, Benj, like this is like top tier stuff." Like, and every single time you've made a move and you've made a considered change, and you see these things happening, it's like, "Oh, it's this year." No, it's nothing to do with the year. You did it. You did this. You've worked your ass off. You've stayed honest. You've stayed true, and you've not allowed other people to contaminate what you think is aesthetically pleasing.
I don't really care about what anyone thinks about my stuff anyway, to a degree. But I do like people to have a connection with it. I'm not saying I want people to hate my photographs. I want like if they have a negative emotion from it, it's the photograph still doing its job. With the whole Instagram world, they want to fall into the algorithms or get likes and things like that. And this is gonna might annoy people. And it's like they tried too hard. Like it's like they're like, why are you taking that photograph? Oh, for Instagram, I take the photographs for me. Instagram just is where I put them. And a lot of my friends, they won't mind me saying this, because I tell them, I'm like, if you're taking your photographs just to post on Instagram, there's not much depth to that. There's not much, like, it's not going to last, because Instagram might not last. Like, if Instagram got deleted tomorrow, would you still, like, and you didn't have anywhere to put them photographs, you'd stop taking photographs if that's the only reason you're taking them. Whereas if it got deleted tomorrow, I'd be like, oh, right, let's find Flickr.
Because like that
Yeah,
last
go on.
point, again, I'm going to argue that your attitude is correct. Like the thing that I
Yeah.
like about it is you're saying that I'm not going to stop taking photographs because of Instagram, but I also think that you've been good at not selling out as well.
I'm really picky with what I do job wise. I'm really selfish with my time.
There's not a lot of people that would be able to resist monetizing their Instagram before they got to 27,000 people following them.
Like, why would you do that? Like, it could just disappear, you know? I wouldn't want to put everything into it and one morning wake up and be like last year when Instagram had that crash and it deleted, like, what is it, like 1 million accounts got suspended or deleted, and they had a glitch in the system. Like, my friend, like, he woke up one morning and he had, well, no account. It was gone. And then it took him a week to get it back. But like, if that happened to me, I'd be like, oh, right, let's get a new account. I wonder if my username's available again since it's now been deleted.
I mean, that'd be nice and seamless. You could just re-upload and start again and it'll be good.
Oh, God, yeah.
I think this is part of why I'm kind of excited for you, because the way that you're approaching your career is slow and it's honest. And those two things don't come in a great deal of supply. Like, you're not oversharing, but everything that you do share is honest. You said you're going to be traveling more this year. And if that wasn't a reason to follow you right now and getting on the ground floor, I don't know what is. Because if you're saying that the main thing you need to do is experience more things in life, and you're saying like, cool, I've queued up 1 million more life experiences this year, we're all going to have a really good time. It's going to be great.
My New York body of work is going to be good. Like, I know already. I'm excited to get out there and shoot.
I can't tell you like how much gold is in this conversation with Benj. Like, understanding that you need to ask for things if you want to get something. You need to approach your body of work carefully and cleanly, and try and like hold on to honesty in your artwork and integrity. Don't view any kind of followership as celebrity for you. Be honest about the way that you approach your work. And finally, like, don't be afraid of turning down proposals if they don't fully fit with you.
Yeah. Say no. If it wasn't in your eyesight originally, then why do it?
But if anybody wants to have a look at Benj's work, there'll be links to all that detail in the show notes. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks again for your time, Benj. Everybody go follow him, comment nice things on his pictures, because obviously we want to make sure he sees it. And yeah, we'll see everybody again next week.